Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher, and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, March the 13th, and it is a somewhat sunny day. So sunny enough that we can film in here. Haven't had to run the heater or anything. Not sunny enough that it is gloriously, warm in here, and so I'm wearing the sweater again, which is totally fine. But the other thing that was interesting for me as I was setting this up is where I live in the northern hemisphere, the sun, of course, where the sun is in the sky changes over time, so which leads to us having long days in the summer and short days of sunlight in the winter time. And already between last week and this week, the sun has moved enough over the course of those 7 days that I am no longer going to be blinded by the light. So our position has moved just enough that it's now just above where the windows are, so it's not shining directly in here. So I'm not blinded by the light as I have been for the past several weeks. And the funny thing is, even as that was happening, I was sort of going like, man, I don't remember being blinded by the light, which means probably give me another year of this, we'll be back into this same time frame, and I'll be going like it's shining directly in my eyes, and how did we do this before? And I will probably continue to forget that I've faced that problem before. But I laughed as I was setting it all, going like, it's just passed, so I'm not going to be blinded by the light. So happy about that. And the days are going to be getting warmer. We've got a couple of, it's now again where I live, it's hit and miss. So we're going to have a couple of glorious warm days, which for us at this time of year, we've got a couple of days coming where it's like into the low to mid 50s, which is going to be nice. And after that, I think we have a cold spell, and then we get, anyway. Kind of annoyed at watching all those people who are like, it's almost time to start thinking about planting and getting the gardens ready. And I'm looking at my backyard and going, yeah, snow. Yeah, still got snow out there, which is not unusual for us, but anyway. Okay. So with that, just always want to start off that I'm continuing, thoughts and prayers are going out to the people of the Ukraine. Again, the news on the situation there it's not good. Thinking about them, really hoping that calmer and rational, peaceful heads prevail in any of the discussions that are ongoing. Again, based on the news reports I'm getting, not optimistic that that's going to be anytime soon, unfortunately. So really thinking about them. Did want to briefly sort of say I'm also thinking about the people in Australia, in Queensland and New South Wales, who are facing some devastating floods there. We had some pretty hefty flooding here a number of years ago, so I remember it didn't affect me personally, but I certainly knew people that were affected by that. So yeah, that's can be pretty problematic. Not as bad as the situation in the Ukraine, but again, if you're living in the midst of it, it's heartbreaking and potentially, for small businesses, with everything else that's going on, could be devastating to your business. So thinking about them as well. And yeah, just wishing that there was, that things, globally were a little bit better, a lot better. But anyway, there's only so much I as an individual can do. So just wanted, if anyone is watching from those locations, just to know that I am thinking about you and hoping that you're staying safe to the best of your ability. And with that, just wanted to deal with a couple of the questions that were coming from last week's video. So I had a little bit of a chuckle. I had a question come in about the paint color for the wall behind me, and I kind of chuckle because periodically I get that comment coming in. So it's a paint color that I can find surprisingly quickly. So it is a Benjamin Moore color. Now, I don't know if it's a current color, but if you go into a Benjamin Moore store and you have the code and the name, they can usually look it up and replicate it. So it is Benjamin Moore 2072-30 Purple Lotus is the paint color for the wall behind me. But thank you for enjoying it. I enjoy it as well. I did have a friend who said, you really should show them the rest of the room. And I am thinking at one point I will do that. I would probably do it closer to Christmas because I think it looks better when it's decorated for Christmas. Anyway, Lena had a comment about large projects, and she sort of, could appreciate the fact that I work on all these, ridiculously large projects, which I flat out say will take me many years to accomplish. She's working on a large project and is finding it overwhelming. So having done the nativity and having a number of larger projects, so just a couple of thoughts on that. One, when you're finding it overwhelming, so one, I'm starting from the point where I'm assuming you don't have a deadline. If you have a deadline for completing, that's a whole other kettle of fish. If you're stitching it just for yourself, my thoughts are set a goal for yourself on the large project, and once you've achieved that goal, work on something else just to give yourself a bit of a break. So that was one of my big lessons on the nativity. So even though I was pushing myself to get it accomplished and get it accomplished faster, I probably would have been better off by giving myself periodic breaks of not working on it at all, and working on something else and then coming back to it is trying to, always work on it. Because I think that's where it's the large project starts to become something where you aren't looking forward to working on it. And so you find all sorts of other things to do so that you don't work on it. I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to watch Flosstube, but I'm maybe going to get in 10 stitches of stitching and not work on this. Whereas if you're sort of coming back to it after a little bit of a break, you're like, okay, you've had a little bit of time to reset. And again, sort of set a specific manageable goal for yourself. Give yourself a little bit of a break and then come back. Because what I do find on the larger projects is, and we can talk about it when we talk about Jerusalem, is that sometimes it's like when you have that step back and you look at it and you go like, man, I really did get something accomplished and I have made progress. If you're working on it every day and doing something, whether it's a lot or a little, it's actually harder for you to see it. So it might even be things like take a picture of your project at the start of the week where you're working on it, and then take a picture of it at the end of the week and go, wow, look at how much progress I actually have made on that project. Because it gives you a little more of a you may not feel like you're making progress, but it's that step back and sort of going, wow, I did actually I've progressed on this overwhelming project. So just a couple of thoughts on that. And Dee made a comment about the sampler of stitches, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the sampler of stitches, because I totally agree with you. All right, so what have I worked on this week? So I did work on my Cottage of the Month from Country Cottage Needleworks. That's what that's supposed to look like. And I didn't get as far as I was hoping. So I was hoping that by today it would be finished, but it's not. So there's where I'm at. What have I got left to do? In my head, I thought I had finished this last pink flower down here, but clearly I've got one more to go. So this needs to get replicated up here at the top. I've got the two center ones done, so I just need to do this top border up here. I've got one more of these green things, goes up about here. And then I've got some 4 light green leaves that need to go here on the tree, and then I need to fill in the center of the flowers in these windows. So the interesting thing about the fill-in for the windows is that the called for color according to the chart is that the windows are to be filled in with this really dark gray black. I think it's 3031, but don't quote me on that. So again, so here's what the chart looks like with those dark windows. And I'm not sure I like the dark windows. So in the center of these pink flowers, those are supposed to be yellow. So what I have done is, so the darker of these two yellows is the called for the center of those flowers. And so I haven't decided whether this is the correct yellow, given that I have changed the pink from the called for 957 to 605. So I've also pulled one that's slightly lighter. So I'll have to make that decision because we all know from last week I have a bit of a yellow sensitivity. But I'm also, believe it or not, debating whether to add more yellow into this one and make the windows this paler yellow as opposed to the very dark gray black. I just feel like, you know, I'm not sure I like black filled windows. So I'm gonna have to make that decision. Again, as I said, I was really hoping by this point in time that I would have finished my March cottage, which I did not get that accomplished this week. So I, you know, tomorrow when I get into my regular stitching, because of course I have specific Sunday stitching, I may be very specifically putting in my length of floss onto Jerusalem and then trying to focus on this just to get this wrapped up. So hopefully next week this will be completed. But, you know, decent progress. Got some stuff accomplished on that. And, you know, as I've watched a couple of Flosstubers this week, they're like, oh, I didn't get a lot of stitching done this week. I didn't get a lot of progress on my, you know, stated objectives for the week. But the answer is progress is progress. And that's the reality of life, is that some weeks you have a good stitching week and some weeks they're not your best stitching week. And that's okay. As long as you've made some progress, you've made progress. All right. So last Sunday, of course, was the 6th of the month. So starting in February, I had mentioned that I was working on a new project and I was only going to work on it on the 6th of every month. So just one day. It's interesting when started it on February 6th, of course, the next March 6th was a Sunday, which means it also was on designated sampler of stitches stitching day. So I had to juggle. You know, there's always things to do on a Sunday. Plus getting in my sampler of stitches to make the recording. Oh yeah, by the way, sorry about all the issues last week. Don't know what happened. I'm really hoping it doesn't occur again this week, but don't know how it happened last week. Anyway, so my designated project for the 6th of the month is this French country crown, which I am doing as my platinum anniversary stitching in recognition of Queen Elizabeth II, 70 years on the throne. So I started it on February 6th because that is the day of her ascension to the throne, and I'm going to work on it on the 6th of every month. So again, not a ton of progress because I was balancing, you know, this project along with sampler of stitches. And the stitching on this one is always slower than it is on other projects. Why? Because I'm doing this entire project. Don't know if you can see it, but I'm doing it with beads. So this entire design is going to be done with beads. I am stitching it using, what's my bead number? 42010. I am stitching this on a 28 count Navy Blue Lugana. So I'm happy with how it's looking, but because I'm beading it on navy blue using invisible thread. So my stitching is slower because it just slows things down. Again, I'm absolutely doing this to myself, but I'm happy with the outcome. So I'm okay that I kind of sort of was looking at the entire design and went, you know, how long is this going to take me if this is what I'm getting done? You know, so what I got on day one was sort of this top bit of the crown. This is my second day of stitching, which is this. Didn't count them because I don't like to, you know, measure myself that way. But I was like going, you know, it could easily take me, you know, till February of next year to get this tiny little thing stitched. You know, the stitch count on this is 71 by 63. And yes, I would make more progress on this if I just sat down and did it, because you would get into more of a rhythm with the beading than by just doing it, you know, one day at a time. But that's the schedule that I've set for myself. Now, 6 months from now, I might be saying to myself, you know, just get this done and move on with things. So that could change as well. But for now, I'm okay with sort of just working on it the one day a month and making a little bit of progress. The other interesting thing about this particular piece, again, given that I want to add, you know, it says to the Queen, and then I want to add Elizabeth II and, you know, the date of her ascension. Again, I've said morbidly, this is going to be my tribute piece to the Queen. I'm stitching it in the year of her Platinum Jubilee, but it's not going to be finished, unfortunately, until she has passed away and I can actually put the ending date of her reign as well. She's the only queen I'm ever going to know in my lifetime. So I had mentioned when I first started working on this February that I was going to have to find an alphabet to do the Elizabeth II and her dates and all that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, when I was uploading that and getting my links to the JBW Designs website and putting that in, as I do when I tend to look at things on that website just to make sure there's, you know, everything's the way I think it is. She actually has a free alphabet on there in this font. So I've downloaded that, added that into the JBW folder that I've got, so that when it comes time for me to add Elizabeth II and her dates and all that kind of stuff, the font for this, including the numbers, is already there. It's her French country alphabet. So she's got a number of French country, fill in the last words, designs as part of her catalog. So I guess this, you know, she may have had enough requests for letters so that people could personalize them, that she's actually got one out there that's free. So I've downloaded that. So any qualms I had about my ability to find the appropriate font and how I was going to add all of that, totally fine. I've got the French country alphabet downloaded. It's at the moment safely on my computer, so that when we get to that part, I know what I'm doing. So again, just a little bit more on my piece. Again, it's an interesting piece for me with it being all beads. Happy with how it's coming along. And you will see this again in April when it comes out for its April day of stitching. Now, again, even on that day, it will be a day where I'm juggling because we'll still be in Lent. So we will be combining my Lent stitching along with that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on here today, as always. Okay. So, as I've brought up the Lent stitching, so my Lent stitching is for the second year in a row. I am working on Jerusalem by Thea Gouverneur. The difference between this Lent and the previous Lent is my rotation for stitching on this piece is different this year. And here comes my gigantic piece. but I feel like I made good progress this week. So this top part is starting to get almost completely filled in. Okay, I was just looking over here going, so this is completely filled in. There's actually only a couple of stitches left to go in here. You know, made some progress in this. And again, so what I've been doing, you know, I was sort of picking a symbol and stitching it, and then if it showed up elsewhere on the page, I was filling it in, which has caused you know, a lot of the progress over here. So the majority of this green, certainly all of this coming up the side here, there were 2 stitches of that green over here, and so I came and I finished off my thread length here. But of course, because I'm using Markup RXP and I saw all of the symbols here, I just kept going. So I haven't completely finished that color on this page because there's a bunch that come over here, and I was just like, I wasn't in the mood to count over and make sure that everything was going okay. But there was quite a solid bit just coming up the side here. And, you know, so I got that completed. And then the funny thing is last night I sat down with the intention of sort of saying I wanted to make sure that the center part was filled in. And I was just going to pick this, you know, the few remaining, there were about 3 or 4 that were remaining in the center section, and I was going to make sure I got those filled in so that it was completely solid. And as I started to work on it, I decided that's not what I was going to do. So what I did is, because of course we all know I'm working off of those dreaded floss cards, which are going to live to the end of this project. And I just went, I'm just going to, instead of, because I struggle with finding the symbols on the 3 sets of floss cards and all that kind of stuff, I just sat there and I went, let's just go down this particular card, and whatever, I'm just going to start at the top of the card and went, is there any of that symbol left on this page? And if so, I'm going to get that stitched. So that's what I did last night. So I didn't get sort of, you know, there's a few sitting here, but it was actually surprising to me how much got filled in just by doing that. You know, because I'm at that stage where some of the things, some of the colors that were left, you know, like there were some colors over here that I, you know, stitched. And when you got there, it's like there were congratulations. There were, you know, 2 of one color and 1 of another color. And then that was the end for that entire page. So it was sort of forcing me as I was going down the colors, the symbols on the color cards, sort of saying like, okay, just you found it on the dumb floss card. So just get it stitched and move on. Now, there are a couple of colors on that are left in here for me to do where the symbol is problematic. Now, it was later at night and I kind of looked at them and went, there are a couple of symbols that are actually very hard to differentiate on the pattern, both the photocopy and of course even on the scanned copy. So I was going to have to make sure I sat down and carefully looked at the original, which even then it's not optimistic, and sort them out, and I just wasn't in the mood last night to do that. So this next week I will, there's those 2 symbols that I need to pay really close attention to and make sure that I'm doing them correctly. Those will get done later this week. But it's filling in nicely. You know, we're coming close to sort of, you know, all of this bottom section. I'm just going to hold it up closer again. Yeah. So there's been a lot of progress about getting this bottom section filled in, as well as, like I say, I'm trying to fill in this, finish filling in this top part. And again, this is a prime example where, you know, I was so excited last week about how much progress I had made about, you know, certainly getting a lot of this top filled in. And, you know, I would say as of Friday night, I was looking at it saying like, wow, compared to last week, you haven't got a lot accomplished. And then, of course, I looked at it, you know, because I went back and looked at where I was last week and went, no, you really did get stuff accomplished this week. Now, again, when you're doing stuff where you're filling in, where, like honestly, there was probably about 10 symbols where there was probably no more than 10 stitches in totality left for me to do. But of course, you know, in some cases, in three, you know, you've got 10 stitches, but they're in 3 or 4 different spots in this design on this page. So, you know, when you're doing that kind of stitching, you know, that kind of slows down how fast your progress is, right? You know, the joy of working on the screen is that, you know, you could get quite a bit done because it was all continuous, as opposed to find the 2 stitches, do 3 stitches, do 1 stitch, do 1 stitch, right? But, you know, it all has to get done. This is, so clearly, this is where the page, technically the page that I'm working on ends. Yes, I've spilled over into this other page, and that's totally fine. On this side, this is the edge of the page, and I have not gone on to page 4 here. I've clearly gone down this way. So here's the page break, page break, page break. And really, I do want to make sure, you know, one of my overarching goals is certainly, hopefully, by the time Easter hits, this entire page will be complete, including the backstitching on this page. Now, the backstitching diagrams in a Thea Gouverneur pattern are, you know, painful. So that's going to be a little bit of a chore when it gets there. But I've made the decision specifically because I don't want to get to the, you know, to the end of the stitching and go, ugh, you have all of this backstitching, because there is a decent amount of backstitching to be done on this particular design. And as I say, the charting is, you know, somewhat problematic. So I would rather, you know, so get all of the stitching on this page complete and then sit down and force myself to do all of the back stitching for this page, so at least you can go, the page is done. Because I really think it would hinder progress at the very end of this project if I had all of the cross stitching done and had all of the back stitching left to go. I think I would put that off and procrastinate and delay and do 47 things other than doing that. So I'm going to force myself to do the back stitching before I really move on to like the next page of cross stitching, just so that I don't have that drag at the end of the project. The other thing is, you know, because this has been kitted up with DMC, so I've got the dreaded DMC metallics going on here, which are not fun to work with. So again, and it's really hard to tell on, you know, based on this picture, but there's quite a bit of metallic in the Dome of the Rock. Now, that shouldn't surprise me, but it sort of surprised me because the picture didn't really, like, it looked like they made it sort of a golden color, which fine, but there really is quite a bit of metallic in here. So I'm also going to try and do everything and then get my metallics going in here because I just don't enjoy working with them. So there is a symbol up here that is the metallic, and I just said to myself, I'm holding off. I'm going to try and get all the rest of the cross stitching done on this page and then come back and sort of finish up with those metallics at the end before I get onto the dreaded back stitching. So don't know if that's a positive approach or a negative approach, but again, so when I start to stitch on this on Monday, I will be going back and working my way through the rest of the color card, those floss cards, just sort of choosing the symbol off of the color card and then finding it and filling it in, just because I have the dreaded cards. Anyway, but I feel like it's actually made some decent progress this week. Hopefully by next week, sort of these arches down here will be completely filled in, as well as sort of this top section in the Church of All Nations without the metallics. So I'm hoping to get more progress on filling in sort of the greenery on the side here. Sort of all of this green here. I have looked ahead and went, so I think what really happened is I chose one of the things where it's like the most fussy, confetti, heavy sections of the entire chart is where I started. That sounds like me. So I have looked ahead because I am going to work my way over to the edge this way and then come back and do this. So I will be moving over here to page 4 next. And, you know, originally when I came in, this is a fairly confetti heavy section of the green, but this is not. It's actually only about 4 different colors. So I looked ahead to the next page and went, oh, the next page actually looks not that bad. There's a lot more chunks of sections of things where you're like, okay, I'll be able to make a lot of progress because it's only, you know, again, there's only 4 colors of green in here. And, you know, certainly this building here only has about 5 or 6 colors in it. So it'll be interesting when I get over there, but I have to finish this page, right? And again, because they're, you know, I should have known that because they're trying to do these figures from the scene at the top of the Church of All Nations, which is where all of that confetti stitching is coming from. But, you know, even looking down as you move down in the Church of All Nations, you know, I've looked at the page below it as well. I'm like, certainly starting here, this is going to go a lot faster than the top part. Anyway. Of course I started in the hardest part, but if nothing else, once I get this page done, hopefully when I move over to here, I'll go, you read that chart correctly and it's moving a lot quicker. But anyway, so again, plans for this week is certainly to get the sections here completely filled in and move on to sort of filling in the green over here and the dome of the rock. And then move on to the dreaded back stitching on that page. Because again, this is page 3 of 10. I haven't done page 1 or page 2. 3 of 10. But before I fully move on to page 4, all of page 3 needs to be done, including the back stitching. So we'll see how that goes. All right. So then, of course, last week on Sunday, I also worked on my sampler of stitches. This is the Stitch Along hosted by Sarah Hughes of the Stitchin' Mommy. This is the 9-part series of charts by the Drawn Thread. So here's where I got to, and I just realized I forgot to bring the chart for this section. So I was hoping to see how much of the so I needed to finish D, and so I did get all of D completed. We'll talk about that in just a second. And I started to work on E, and I did not get all of E completed. There's a series of about 7 eyelets here that I need to do. There's 2 stitches of cross stitches to fill in this eggplant. This is a layered specialty stitch, so I've done the bottom layer, but I need to do the top layer, and I need to finish this one. I'm now feeling badly I did not bring the actual chart for this one. So there's a couple of things going on here, and I mentioned this last week, that one of the things, so these 2 stitches here, this is one of the charts that does call for that very light mauve, which I said last week I was going to have to make a decision on when we get there, and we're coming up to that decision. I have not put it in because it's actually called for when I do the letter F. So once I make the decision for what I'm using in the letter F for that very light mauve, that will end up being my decision to fill in these 2. So Dee's comment about this is that she's very frustrated with the charts for this particular design because the stitch diagrams and the pattern diagram, and in some cases the picture shown on the cover, do not agree with each other. And I totally agree with that. You have to, this is certainly a case where you have to be very careful when you're stitching this, that you, I was talking to a friend of mine who, when she was working on it, sort of said, you know, she was doing it as a class at an LNS that existed at that point in time, where they said you have to make a decision what you're going to follow. And the answer is you need to do that pretty much for quite a few of the specialty stitches, right? You need to look at what the stitch diagram says versus what the main chart says, and look at the picture on the front of the cover and decide what you're going to do. Now, and in some cases, if you're like me, you like in some cases 2 out of the 3 agree, but not necessarily all 3 of them agree. And so certainly on this stitch here, 2 out of the 3 agreed. So the cover picture and the main diagram agreed with each other. The stitch diagram did not agree. But I went with the stitch diagram because this is really probably going to be really hard to tell. I have not followed the main diagram or the picture because I've got at the very bottom of these, I've got the angled half stitch up at the bottom, because I just felt like it looked like the specialty stitch was actually more finished that way. So I didn't like how it looked on the front cover diagram. I didn't necessarily like how it looked on the main diagram, and so I went with the specialty stitch diagram and did it my way, and I like how it looks. The other one here, and this is really hard to see, so this was stitched, the called for is 1 strand of Soie 103, and again, because I'm changing the colors, I did it with the white. I am debating pulling this out because it really does fade in. It's very hard to see it both on camera and in real life. Whereas I feel, you know, this cushion stitch down here, which is done with 2 strands of Soie d'Alger, you know, the antique stitch here, you know, the buttonhole stitch, and this stitch over here, which I forget the name of, these at least stand out. And again, it's not looking fantastic on camera, but in real life, you can very clearly see those stitches on the piece. So I'm thinking about ripping this stitch out and redoing it with either 2 strands of the Soie d'Alger, which I'm not sure that's the right answer, or potentially doing it with the Soie Perlee in white. Now, I've had my first stitch where I really, really, really didn't like it, and it's this one over here. Now, I will say I find it to be a very messy stitch. Like, I don't think it looks nice regardless, and even on the sample, like the picture on the front cover of this, it doesn't look good. Like, I don't like how it looks. Now, I'm not going to bother trying to come up with some named stitch to change it or whatever, but I laughed. I only have 4 more of these stitches left to do, but I'd reached the end of my length of Soie Perlee that I had, and I was like, blah, I'm done with this stitch. So tonight I have to sit down and do 4 more of them and finish this off. But it's the first one out of all of the specialty stitches here where I just like, I don't like it at all. I don't know, in my head I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like how it looks. I don't understand why anybody would use this because it looks messy. Anyway, so I'm going to finish it off. I've got 4 more left to do here. You know, 7 eyelet stitches and then the top of this. So it won't take me very long to finish off E tonight and then move on to F. Yes, I forget. I think maybe this is the week that I'm supposed to finish. No, that's not true. This is probably the first week I was supposed to start working on F, so I feel like I've done a reasonable job of catching back up. So over the next 2 weeks, I need to get F finished. So again, we'll see how much I can get accomplished tonight on F. Finish up again so you can see. So I've got my 7 eyelet stitches, finish this, and those dumb 4 stitches over here. But knowing me, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm probably going to finish this bit and start working on F and delay putting in those 4 stitches here. Now, part of it has to do with the fact because I need to make the decision about whether I think changing this out into the Soie Perlee or 2 strands of Soie d'Alger is right. And if I'm hauling out the Soie Perlee to do this, I need to make that decision. So I will try to get that decision done tonight while I'm working on it, but we'll see how fast my F goes. And I didn't post on Instagram this week because I normally post a week later, sort of where my sampler of stitches is, and I'm totally behind because I forgot to post a new picture that says, hey, I've restarted this and here's where I'm at. So I missed that one. And when I was working on it last Sunday, I was working on it and had done a bunch of stuff, and I was like, oh, you forgot to take your starting picture to post on Instagram. So tonight, I have to make sure I remember to take my starting picture so I can post it on Instagram this week to say, here's where I started. Anyway, we'll try and do a better job of posting on Instagram to the hashtag for this one, which is SOS 2022 SAL. So I'm behind on my posting. I'm hoping to do better on that one. And then work on F this week. So if nothing else, so even though I restarted this, I feel like I'm in not bad shape, that it's coming along. And I think I am on track. You know, because again, the overarching goal of this is as long as you get 1 letter completed every 2 weeks, you will have, again, this is a series of, that's upside down. This is a series of 9 charts that at the end of the year, you will have the whole design complete. Which again, I think that's a very positive, and I love the approach. And so far this year, despite the fact that I had to restart it, I feel like it's working out really well for me. I'm mostly keeping up with the SAL. You know, I think working on it, you know, setting aside Sundays to work on it is working out for me. So I can just sort of say, this is my main project for Sundays. And after I do the flurry of things on Sundays and recording and uploading and all that kind of stuff, you know, as I say, try to do all those things, and then I sit down and have dinner and then go, okay, now I get to stitch. And, you know, I think it's working out really well for me so far. So yeah, thank you, Sarah, for, you know, coming up with the impetus and doing it, because I think there's actually quite a few things from this that I will be carrying forward into my stitching plans on a go-forward basis because of how well it has worked out for me. Now, it's easy for me to say, here we are at March 13th. There's quite a few weeks left to go this year, although the year does seem to be bombing along. Despite how slow January went, it seems to have picked up speed. So anyway, yeah. All right, so those are the 4 projects that I worked on this week. And with that, let's get into some Stashquisitions. I will do a little bit of a caveat here going, I have picked up some of my Nashville haul. I am not showing it on this video. We're going to do that next week. So this is non-Nashville related haul, which is not huge, but it does sort of tie into the topic for this week. So one of the things that I picked up this week while I was out doing some errands is this pill organizer. Now, you are probably sitting out there and looking at this going like, that's nice for you. Why is this part of your stitching haul? Well, let me explain it to you. So a friend of mine was working on the Rosewood Manor Quaker Diamonds, which there's a Valdani thread pack for that. And in passing, she said, by the way, so she's a retired nurse, and she said, I was looking at sort of those Valdani balls and went, I bet you they'd fit into one of those pill organizers, and then I could organize them and it would really help me out. And so she went and she got one, and she's like, it is the perfect thing. So here is, so this is not from one of those thread packs, but so here is a Valdani thread ball. This is one of their silks. Right, so this is the thread pack. the thread pack. This is the ball of thread. And it fits perfectly. So of course, because this is 7 days times 2, you could get up to 14 of them in here. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head how many colors there are in the Quaker Diamonds pattern, but I certainly know for the seasonal Quakers from Rosewood Manor, so whether it's spring Quaker, summer Quaker, autumn Quaker, blah, 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 my recollection is that there are 12 colors required for each of those designs, which means one of these, you could put all of your Valdanis in here, and they would fit, and you could have them organized that way. The other thing she said is that, and again, because when you're, certainly on those ones, if you're doing it on like the called for count of fabric, as long as you haven't gone somewhere weird like, 40, 46, or egregiously 53, 56 count fabric, and you're using the called for Valdanis, because you're taking one strand right off of here and not having to skein it, she could take off a length, and she actually left a threaded needle in each of the colors. She said, you just slipped it right into the ball, used, I don't remember if she said petites, but since I only use petites, yeah, I could see that, you pick a thread length, you could still leave it in there and just leave the little bit of the needle tucked into there. And so she said she could have a threaded needle in each of the colors that she was using, so that if she, if she was changing, it was very quick for her to change because she had a threaded needle embedded in each of the balls in this pill organizer. So the problem that I've had, so I love the idea, and I know that I've got the 4 seasonal Quakers, was the trick is you need to get the, so this is the one that I got, and I got it from Save On Foods, is that you need to get, I already just did this, there you go, extra large. Large is not the correct size. Extra large is what you need to get to make this work. And the problem is that, so I've been looking for this for months, and like even on Amazon, it was very easy for me to find the ones that are called large pill organizers. Large is not the correct size. You have to get the extra large ones. So I stumbled across this at Save On Foods in their pharmacy section and brought it home. I will say that I kind of had a quick look at it and went, I'm not sure that that's really going to fit, but I went, she told me that extra large was the right one, so I bought it, and I went, worst case scenario, I will return it. But the answer is, they're the perfect size. So now that I know that it's there, I think they had one more. I think one of my goals for this week is that I'm actually going to go back to Save On Foods and get another one. Only because, do I really think I need to? Not necessarily, but because it's been really hard for me to find. And if I ever find myself where I'm trying to work on 2 of my seasonal Quakers for Rosewood Manor, it might be beneficial to have 2. Because then, I will say that certainly, do I think that I'm going to sit down and work on one of the seasonal Quakers from Rosewood Manor and finish that thing like lickety-split? Well, I know that's not going to happen because it's a larger project. So that's why I'm thinking 2 is the right answer for me, is because I, know that it will take me longer than, a couple of weeks to rattle one of those things off, and then I could keep my organization system. And again, I don't have one of my project bags here, but again, this will fit in one of my project bags that I'm using off of Amazon quite nicely. Thank you very much. And it will keep it all organized. I love this. So I do think I need to go back and get a second one of these this week, now that I know that they have them. Knowing my luck, I will swing by Save On Foods and go, and they'll be gone. So maybe tomorrow I'll make sure I run out and do that. All right. The next thing that I've got to show for haul. So I did do an order. I've got some trailing threads that I just know are going to run into things and be problematic. So I did order some Joblin. This is a couple of weeks ago. It arrived this week. So I got a piece of 28 count Star Sapphire Joblin. This is a fat quarter. And this next piece also ties into the topic. As you know, my temperature tree, which I acknowledge I have not worked on this month at all so far. I was doing that on a piece of 32 count Summer Sky Jobelan. I had cut my fat half originally into 2 fat quarters, which I'm using one for the one that I'm currently working on, and I've deliberately set aside the second piece to do my second temperature tree. So it's reserved. It's out of the stash. It's not available for anything else. It has a designated purpose and it is set aside. So I still had some 32 count, again, it's going to blow out. Some 32 count Summer Sky Jobelan, which is really lovely. I like Jobelan, but it's hard to come by. Certainly 32 count Summer Sky has been a little hard to get. I certainly know that my LNS has had a really hard time getting it. And, you know, I kind of checked into the status and they were like, yeah, we've had some on order for quite some time. It's back ordered, hard to get. And I went, you've got some, it's fine. I was like, supply chain issues, you don't need it imminently, whatever. But I've got a plan coming up, and we'll talk about that next week, where I'm cutting into the last of my Jobelan, my 32 count Summer Sky Jobelan. So then I was like, ooh, it's turning into a problem. And again, it's like I know that my LNS has had a hard time getting it. The other story that ties into this is a number of years ago, so current pandemic supply chain issues, there was a new color of Jobelan that had come out. It was called Mixed Berry, and I had asked one of my LNSs to order that in for me. Sight unseen, I was like, great, just bring it in, because, from what I could see online, it was totally my colorway. And they ordered it, and they didn't get it, and so they phoned me and said they've asked us to reorder because it didn't come on this shipment. Do you want us to reorder it? And I said yes. Again, it was fabric. It was just going into my stash. It was totally fine. So they ordered it 3 times and it didn't come. And so I was having a bit of a chat with them, and they said, well, one of the interesting things is when, again, so this is their version of things. So I don't know if the distributor would agree with this or not, but what they were working off is that the distributor sort of filled all of the US orders first, and then if there was anything left over, that's when international shops were getting their crack at things like the hand-dyed Jobelans. So after 3 tries, I sort of said, you know what, it's just not coming. You've tried 3 times, so thanks for trying. But, again, it was just going into my stash and, no big deal. So stop frustrating yourself. And, every time that they were trying, they were having to reach out and say, what do you want us to do? Do you want us to keep this on order for you? Do you want us, what do you want to do? Right? So it's time on their side as well. And I said, we're good. So I looked online. So I then ordered that exact same Jobelan from an American store. They actually sent me a notification, said, look, we've got to order this. But I received it like 6 weeks later. So that experience said to me, it's like, there may be some truth to what the store was saying, that they're filling sort of the American shop orders first. And then if they have leftovers, if they have availability of the product, then they're shipping it to international stores, which I was like going, you know, again, my LNS had tried multiple times to get this. The American shop that I ordered it from themselves said that they had to order it, but I got it, as far as I was concerned, reasonably quickly. And again, so this is a number of years ago. So whether or not that's still accurate or not, but I certainly know that's an experience that was sitting in my head. So when I knew that I was going to have to break into my last piece of 32 count Summer Sky Jobelan, I went, ooh, I need to order this, and I need to order it from an American shop. So I actually went, and Joblin is back ordered, and all sorts of things are going on. So I had a moment as well where I was like, ooh, maybe I should see if I can't find some Summer Sky Jobelan from an American store where they say that they have it in stock. And so I did find one that they had it, and so I ordered some. Now, so one, I ordered it. One, I'm happy I got it. Two, the interesting thing is when I opened it up, I went, oh yeah, things are different. And again, so this is, it's just not going to show up well at all. So here is my new Summer Sky Jobelan, and it's fine. It's perfectly fine. It's not as blue as my old Summer Sky. So again, it's not the perfect thing on camera, but you can see it a little bit. You can see that this is more blue than that. You know, so technically I like this version better than I like this version, but at least they had some. So in real life, you can, you know, again, this is just a paler sky version of things than my original set. So again, I'm really glad that I set aside the one for the temperature tree so that my two temperature trees, which are going to have identical frames and all that kind of stuff, will be from the same. Again, it was a fat half that I cut into two, so at least those two pieces, the fabric is the same. Again, I've got plans, which means I'm cutting into this. So I will now have the debate as to, do I cut into this piece, the new piece, or do I cut into the old piece? We'll have to sort that out. So again, so I ordered this specifically from an American shop because they said they had it in stock. And because they had it in stock, that's where I also got the Star Sapphire Jobelan as well. Anyway, so those, so that's the stash that I've got for you this week. And that's why it sort of ties into this week's topic, which is, let's talk about hand-dyed Evenweaves. Again, so the Summer Sky Jobelan, Jobelan is an even weave, and it's Wichelt's hand-dyed version of things. And so you can tell even from there. So again, my older piece I've had for years. I'm sure it will come as a complete surprise to you that I don't actually mark the year that I acquired fabric on the tag. It just goes into the stash. But I can tell you I have had this for years. And again, it's interesting to me, with any hand-dyed anything, you need to be prepared for there to be variations in the color. How much color there is, the tonality of the color. You know, again, a number of weeks ago, I talked about, I think it was Color and Cotton, that had put a post onto Instagram saying, like, the number of factors that affect their dyeing, right? Like, they can use the exact same dye recipe for the exact same fabric, and it could come out different every single time. And factors impacting it are like the levels of humidity, the chemicals that have gone into the water processing plant, which is feeding into the water that they're using in their location. You know, again, they're not using, you know, bottled water because they're doing dyeing on a massive scale, right? So they're using tap water to do their dyeing, and so the chemicals from the processing plant impact their dye recipes. the fabric itself. Like the fabric is being made from organic material, which is coming from a variety of providers. And even like, I think somebody somewhere in one of the Instagram posts from somewhere sort of said, here is like a large piece of fabric, but clearly the mill, you know, changed the source of the fiber partway through. So they had, you know, when you put this larger piece of fabric into your dye batch, you know, it looked like one piece of fabric. But you clearly tell, like, one side of the fabric from the dye batch was one way and the other side was completely different. And they're like, clearly they changed the source material as they were looming this particular piece of fabric, and it's a different fiber source, and it took the dye completely different. So, you know, as a dyer, what do you do with that? Anyway, so all of these things factor in. You always have to be very careful. It's why I tend to be fairly wary about ordering hand-dyed fabrics sight unseen. You know, because the problem is if you order it, you have to take what you get. You can't, as far as I'm concerned, you can't go back and sort of say, this doesn't look anything like the color that you showed on your website for any of the hand dyers, because the answer is welcome to hand dyed. Every single piece of fabric they dye is going to be different than the one that they dyed before. That is the nature of hand dyed fabric. So today's topic is specifically about how hand-dyed even weaves are different, because a lot of the sites show hand-dyed colors on linen, and the linen takes the dyes in a much heavier, it's much more intense, and it takes it better than the even weaves, because the even weaves, both Lugana and Joblin, are a combination of cotton and rayon. Now, there are different levels of cotton and rayon. I was going to look that up and I forgot to do it. They're slightly different, which is why even Joblin and Lugana take the dyes differently. So, okay, if you are someone who's listening to this through headphones and you've got it really cranked up, I'm just going to have a little warning to you right now. There's going to be a lot of rattling of plastic bags in the background. So just caution. All right. So what started this off is I was clarifying something last week about the Midnight Tryst and the fact that Fabrics by Stephanie, currently on their website, you can't order Joblin, period. So I've been very careful that when I was showing the Celtic Snow, that I said the piece of fabric that I was working on was Midnight Tryst by Fabrics by Stephanie on a 28 count Joblin, period. Because that's actually a very important, you need to have all of that information. So I had a little moment while I was on there where I went and I hauled out my piece of fabric because I said I know I had some left. Well, I do not have a lot left. So again, this is not bad. It's a decent piece of fabric, but you know, it's not like it's a ton. And I'm savoring even this little bit because, you know, you might be able to get some, you know, ornamenty type small thing on there. In my head, I had slightly more of this piece. I don't think I've got a tape measure in here. I just had them going, maybe I should. Oh, I do. So the decent piece that I've got here is, so I'm going to say it's like 14 by 10 and a half. So not bad. Less than a fat eighth. So, you know, I still think I could do something with this, but I still have that. Maybe you should figure out how to get another piece of Midnight Tryst Joblin. Again, right now, I can't order it directly from the website. I don't even know if I reached out directly to Stephanie, whether she would be prepared to try to get a piece of Joblin to dye for me. This close to Nashville, and I'm sure all the orders that are going in, I am not I'm not doing that. I do have it on my radar at some point to try to figure out how to get another piece of this, because I really do like this. But I do have a piece of Midnight Tryst linen, also by Fabrics by Stephanie. Now, this is a 36 count linen. Now, again, this whole topic is going to get really interesting because, you know, cameras and how you see colors on screen and all that kind of. Oh yeah, that'll show up well. So here is Midnight Tryst on 28 count Joblin. And here is Midnight Tryst on 36 count Lugana. So it takes the dye very, very differently. Now, I'm still happy with my Celtic Snow and how it looks on the Midnight Tryst. It would look similar, but it would look a little bit different because this is just so much darker. But that gives you an indication of how differently dyes take between linens and even weaves, right? So that's quite a bit of difference. Again, you're just going to have to hang tight because I have to put these into their respective labeled bags so that I know what's going on. Okay, so that's Midnight Tryst. Okay, again, part of the reason for this topic is after I had gone onto the website and it said winter solstice is a better option if you're looking for blue. So again, if you order Midnight Trysts, so again, here's linen, 28 count Joblin. If you order it in the Lugana, it shows up as purple. It does not come out as blue. And they have that cautionary note directly on the website. So while I was uploading last week, I went into my X-Stitch app, which is where I keep my inventory, and I looked it up and I went, oh, you do have winter solstice in your stash. And I went, I should go have a look at that. And I hauled it out and I went, ooh, interesting. So I have two pieces of winter solstice in my stash from Fabrics by Stephanie. And they're two even weaves, but they're two different even weaves. So I originally had one, I was like, I shouldn't show this because you can't get the Joblin off of the website right now. And then I went, no, you really do need to show this because this really does highlight the difference. So here is winter solstice. Again, wait for it. This is on a 28 count Joblin. And again, one of the discussions I had when I was ordering from Stephanie years and years ago is even in the Joblins, the intensity of color that you get it's darker on a 28 count Joblin than it is on a 32 count Joblin. And so for a couple of the colors that I was ordering, she was very clear with me where she said, if you're looking for the color, you're going to have to give up your count and go down to a 28. Now, as I checked on when I was working on Celtic Snow, it's a 28 count with through the dyeing process, it's ended up as a 30 count where I go, we kind of split the difference between 28 and 32. The 30 count was fine. So here is winter solstice on 28 count Joblin. Again, not currently available on Stephanie's website. But I do have winter solstice on a 28 count Lugana as well in my stash. And here's that difference. Which again, as I said, I was a little bit worried about this topic going, oh, who knows what the camera's going to do, but we're doing it anyway. It's showing up quite different. And again, the level of, variegation that you get in this is quite a bit different. I'm just looking at my piece to see. Yeah, right. Is quite a bit different than the level of variegation that you're getting in the Lugana. So here's 28 count Joblin winter solstice, and here is 28 count winter solstice on Lugana. Both 28 count, two different even weaves. Look at the difference in the colors. So again, originally I was like going, okay, you shouldn't show this at all. And I'm like, no, I really, really should. And that's what led to this topic, is because I had the stuff in stash to say, here is the difference. And again, it's easy, as far as I'm concerned, it's a little bit easier for me to do this than potentially some others because I like even weaves better, so I have more of that in my stash. Anyway, so there's winter solstice in the two different even weaves, both 28 counts. Wow, are they different? Okay, everything has to go back where it started from. So then I decided I was going to pull out some of the other things where I actually had it, colorways where I had it in an even weave as well as in something else. So this I think I've shown before. So this is Picture This Plus Mystic. So this is a 36 count linen Mystic from Picture This Plus. Again, on camera right now, it's showing up as pretty black. It is navy blue, dark blue. But I do also have it. Let me look at my tag. So this is a 28 count Lugana Mystic. Right? Again, you've got a very, very distinct difference in tonality between those two. Now, my understanding from a variety of dyers and etc. is blue is actually one of the hardest ones to get an even weave dyed, particularly into a dark blue. So the level of difference in this intensity does not surprise me. But again, so that's a pretty big difference in, you know, if you ordered Mystic because you saw on the Picture This Plus website that this is what Mystic looked like and you ordered it on a Lugana, I totally understand why somebody would say this doesn't look anything like the colorway that you showed on screen, which is absolutely accurate. But the answer is, particularly if it says the colorway we've shown you is on linen and you're choosing to order it in an even weave, you should, as far as I'm concerned, you should be expecting it to come out quite a bit differently. Now, I do wish that as dyers were dyeing them on different bases, that they would actually take a picture to sort of say, like some of them, like Fiberlicious, because they do a Fabric of the Month Club, and so it's a different color. They're usually pretty good, certainly about their monthly colors, which I don't know that they necessarily go into their regular thing, but certainly for the monthly colors, they go, here's where it is on, you know, a couple of different counts of linen and Aida and even weave, so you can at least see the difference in color gradation for that month's colorway. I wish more of the fabric dyers would do it. There's part of me also goes like, if you're dying to beat the band and like, you know, you're barely getting any sleep trying to keep on top of stuff, I understand that taking a good picture for your website of the different ways is maybe not in your top 25 things to do. But there's a part of me that says it would be helpful if you did it while you were at least dyeing the piece anyway. So again, there you go. Linen, even weave. This is a 28 count Lugana. And again, in my conversations with a variety of dyers, they've said like even, you know, 28 versus 32 is going to take it differently. The 32 could even be lighter than this. So again, if you're ordering even weaves and you haven't seen it in person, caution, caution, caution. you know, again, some of the dyers may be really good about interacting with you. I would say in the current environment, I don't know that you'd get a good answer from Picture This Plus. But some of the others you may be, you know, again, like I say, a number of years ago, I was placing an order with Stephanie, and she was really fantastic about getting back to me and sort of helping me figure out what the right thing for me to order would be that would get it to the colorway that I wanted. All right, so this next one is Picture This Plus. So this is Picture This Plus French Lilac. I'm going to start off with, here it is in a 36 count, a 36 count linen. You'll notice that none of the colors I'm showing you are any of the browns, because I don't necessarily like stitching on brown fabric. And this is a 28 count Lugana French Lilac. Right? Again, the level of intensity is noticeable. The linens always take the darker colors much, much, much better than any of the even weaves. But again, this is going to give you sort of an example of the difference in tonality between a linen and an even weave. Quite a bit different. So if intensity of color is what you're looking at, certainly in the current environment, my recommendation would be to use it. You're probably going to have to give up your even weave and stitch on a linen. And again, I've said this before, color trumps generally both count and type, right? I will choose, as far as I'm concerned, I need to choose the right color that I'm putting my design onto for stitching, because I can work my way through whether it's, you know, this is why I have French Lilac in both a linen and an even weave, is because I can see a use for both of these colors. And for whatever the design is that I'm planning on working on, I would compare these two and then figure out which one it looked better on. Now, it also doesn't help that, you know, this is a fat eighth and this is a fat quarter, so that might drive things, but anyway. All right, what else have I got here? Okay, so this is so I'm getting things out of bags. So here is 32 count Shadow by Picture This Plus, 32 count Linen by Picture This Plus, and here is 32 count Lugana, also Shadow by Picture This Plus. So not, as far as I'm concerned, not quite as high a contrast as you've seen in some of the previous ones, but again, the Lugana is noticeably darker than the linen. And again, not that I have any of the browns, but I would expect that the darker the brown that you're looking at, again, the linen will come out darker than the Lugana. And again, these, depending on your dyer, like I think there are some dyers where you can still order, like I want to say, haven't done check today, like Under the Sea Fabrics, I think you can still order Joblin from, so some of them may still have their Joblin options. Like I say, Fabrics by Stephanie, when I checked a couple of weeks ago, all of the Joblin options were off of theirs. But anyway, so this is Shadow by Picture This Plus. Again, for me, the interesting thing is that this is a 32 count linen and this is a 32 count Lugana. So at least they're the same count, different bases, takes the dye differently. I need to get them back into the right bag so that they're labeled correctly. And I am laughing because I look at the tags, and I will say that the shadow linen that I've got here is, it's fairly old. The shop where it came from, that's not what their tags look like anymore. So some of it may have to do with that dyes have changed over the years for a variety of reasons. But I was also limited to the, I'm only picking versions of over-dyed fabrics that I have two versions of it in my stash, so I can show you the contrast. Trust me, some of my optional topics for later on is just sort of, let's walk through some of my hand-dyed even weaves. Because there is, certainly from the floss tubers I watch, there's more people working on linen than there is working on even weaves. Okay, so this one, so this is a 32 count linen by Picture This Plus called Woodland. And this is Woodland in a 28 count Lugana, right? Look at that difference in color intensity. Okay, this worked out. Like I say, sort of saying, I'm not sure how well all of this is going to show up on camera, because I think I did one probably a year ago where it's like it didn't come out really as well as I had hoped on camera. These ones are showing up really well. Right, so here's your linen Woodland, here's your even weave Woodland. And again, like I can see somebody ordering it saying, this is the sample that they saw on screen for Picture This Plus Woodland. If you order it in an even weave, you are not going to get this level of color intensity. You're going to get this level of color intensity. So if you're someone who likes to work on even weaves, and you're having to order hand-dyed even weaves sight unseen, my recommendation to you is sort of keep this level of intensity difference in your head as you're ordering. Now again, some of the dyers, the hand-dyed dyers that are out there today, you might be able to have a conversation with. Like I say, I'm not sure if you reached out to Picture This Plus. I doubt, haven't done it, so don't quote me. I don't know that you're going to get a good response about what the difference in tonality would be. Like I say, I have had a positive experience with Fabrics by Stephanie where I'd reached out and said, I want to order some fabric. I want it on an even weave. This is my struggle. Can you help me figure out what the right thing to order is? Again, because I would be ordering sight unseen. So like Fabrics by Stephanie might still be able to do that. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure I would reach out right away because she would have just gotten back from Nashville. And who knows what the orders that she took from Nashville that she's trying to work on. Under the Sea Fabrics, I think would do well. I've got some Pole Stitches fabrics, and I know I think I had a conversation with them. Again, this was years ago when I had ordered from them, that I got was able to have a really good conversation about some of the things that I was contemplating ordering. So I think some of the smaller dyers, I know a friend of mine, she'd reached out to Handdyed by Rolanda because she was looking for a very specific colorway, and she had a really good conversation with Rolanda about, what to do and what she was looking for and what the options were. So again, some of the smaller hand dyers, you might be able to have a really good conversation, particularly if you're ordering sight unseen, as to what the best option for you for a colorway would be. But if you're ordering a Picture This Plus fabric from somebody, my answer would be is if you order it, and again, there's a limit as to where shops can get their pictures from. So most of them are relying on the pictures provided, you know, like Picture This Plus, the picture that they're going to grab for their website is the same picture that you're going to see on the Picture This Plus to a large extent. Don't quote me on that, because I do know that there are some shops where they take pictures of the very specific piece of fabric that they're offering up. They do have more limited availability, but whatever. Picture This Plus is somewhat limited in availability these days anyway. But I would say think about this level of difference in tonality if you're ordering an even weave as opposed to a linen. That a lot of the pictures that you see out there are saying, here is the colorway on a linen. If you are ordering the even weave, you should expect it to be much, much lighter. Now, the examples I have here, the level of variegation is actually somewhat similar across the two types, but there are other versions where I've seen them where the level of hand-dyed effect is much, much more muted on the even weave than it is on the linen as well. So factor that in. All right. So there are, so those are the only examples that I have from my stash where I had the colorways in both an even weave as well as something else. But I think it's a fairly good representation of the difference in levels of intensity. And again, like the two different pieces of winter solstice can show you again how different the dyes can take between a Joblin and a Lugana. I will also caution you to say, different dyers use different dyes. And so again, how those dyes take, there's one dyer where I've got some of her fabric in my stash. Again, I haven't hauled it out because I don't have a comparable piece to show the differences. Like there is a hand dyer out there that the dye that they use, they are very, and again, as far as I'm concerned, they're very clear on their website that says this actually, the dye that they use actually turns out stronger on the even weaves than it does on the linens because they're using a different kind of dye. And, again, I've got a couple of pieces of fabric where you're like, yeah, it's really intense coloring. And that if you had ordered it in a linen, it would have been more muted. Now, that as far as I'm concerned, from what I've seen, that is a lot less than the majority of them. But again, you need to be very careful when you're ordering hand-dyed, particularly if you're aiming for hand-dyed even weaves, that one, there's a very, very high likelihood that the color that you're going to get is going to be different than the picture that is shown. So keep that in mind. And again, if you are concerned, I would say don't order until you've tried to have a conversation with the dyer. Again, some dyers may be really good about getting back to you and trying to head you in the right direction for what you're wanting. Given the current situations, they may not necessarily have the time to do that. So I can't speak for everybody, and I would never want to do that. So just caution, caution, caution. I also acknowledge that I'm fortunate that over the many years that I've been hauling out my stash, and again, like even looking at the stash that I've shown you here, like I haven't ordered from Fabrics by Stephanie in a lot of years because I've got stash. But again, the difference in these winter solstices, Joblin, Lugana, whew, that's a big difference. Now, I'm happy to have both of them in my stash. And there's a part of me that says, like, it'd be really interesting to come up with two designs specifically so I could work on them simultaneously, go, like, here's the difference. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. They're in my stash. I'm glad I have them in my stash, particularly because right now you can't get Joblin off of Stephanie's website. But again, that's just a level of difference there. And again, a lot of my stash has come because I am fortunate that I do have LNSs that are local to me. I've had a number of LNSs over the course of my stitching lifetime. where I've had the opportunity to see a variety of different things and pick up different fabrics. And I know that that is not the reality for a lot of stitchers out there. They do not have a physical brick and mortar shop that they can go to and that they can go in that are necessarily carrying a variety of hand-dyed fabrics. So I totally acknowledge that I am very fortunate that I've had the access to see in stock hand-dyed fabrics over many, many years and build up my stash. And again, like some of the stash is many, many years old. Like some of them, again, I look at the tags and go, whoo, that's from a long time ago, because that's not how, you know, in some cases the stores have closed. You know, a number of shops that I have shopped at over the course of the years have closed. So, you know, that optionality has gone away. I'm fortunate that I still have multiple LNSs that I can shop from. So again, you know, again, I'm fortunate that I have that situation. I'm fortunate that I have more than one that I can do that from, and I totally acknowledge that. I recognize that for a lot of people, you know, again, in lots of Facebook groups, you have the people sort of going like, you know, I've seen people like, my nearest LNS is a 3-hour drive one way. And, you know, when times are desperate, like I could see myself bracing myself and saying like, you have to drive for 3 hours to get there, to do some shopping. And again, in the current environment, who knows what you necessarily will find when you get there, and then 3 hours home. Like there could come that time. I also acknowledge that I'm very fortunate that I have a stash that I have built up over years and years and years, that I have this availability in my stash. And again, there are lots of people who don't like having that, don't necessarily have the space to do it. I think about, you know, I know people who've lived in New York City and go like, your apartment sizes there are not close to what I've got where I am. So, you know, your availability to keep a stash is different depending on where you live and your individual circumstances. And so I totally acknowledge how blessed I am, both from a brick and mortar shop perspective, as well as the stash that I've been able to acquire over the years. So I totally acknowledge that. But anyway, so there's an overview of examples of differences of hand-dyed even weaves. I hope that has been helpful. And with that, I'm looking at my stuff going, I think that's all I've got for you this week. This is why I'm not showing my Nashville haul this week, because I'm already over an hour and a half. So for those of you that like longer floss tubes, you're welcome. And for those of you that don't like them, sorry it's taken me so long to go on and on. But I hope the topic has been helpful. As always, if you have any comments, questions, concerns, topics that you would like me to address, feel free to pop those down in the comments down below. Happy to help out in any way that I can. And with that, I hope everybody is staying safe. As I said at the beginning of this, I'm spending a lot of time this week just really concerned about people trying to stay safe in a current variety of situations, a lot of which are not in your control, but don't forget safety first. It's you need your family, you need to stay as safe as you possibly can. As devastating as it is to lose possessions and things like that, in some cases your home, I acknowledge how hard that can be, but please stay safe, stay healthy. And if you are able to, I hope you can find some time to stitch this week. And I hope that just the act of stitching can help bring some a sense of calm and peace for a moment in time to you. So I hope that you can find some time to stitch this week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care.